Hello, YouTube. My name is Alan, and it's that time once again. Let's talk metal. Tonight, we're going to talk some new wave of British heavy metal. Big surprise, I know. But we're going to talk some very obscure new wave of British heavy metal. Big surprise, I know. Yes, this is who I am. This is what I do on a pretty regular basis when I'm not talking about other types of metal. Specifically tonight, though, we're going to talk about a couple of bands who never got their own vinyl product out on the shelves back in the day. So these bands never really got past the demo stage, or in one case, a lone compilation appearance. Now, this is not so unusual. There were lots of bands in this particular boat, lots of hopefuls that never quite managed to release their own single or EP, much less ever get a full album recorded back in the day. They only had demo tapes, some rehearsals, things like that. One of the more famous bands like this is Pagan Altar, who recorded a lot of material back in the day. It leaked out and got bootlegged much later on, and eventually allowed that band to come back and record some really good albums at a much later date. Most bands didn't fare so well, of course. Most of the other bands, like Pagan Altar, they just disappeared into the ether, and maybe in some cases, they were able to get an anthology put out by a label at a later time. We see a lot of these anthologies released these days, but it's been going on for, over 20 years now. And so we're going to look at a couple of examples tonight, beginning with a band from the Kent area of England called Dervish. Now, Dervish didn't get anything released back in the day, but they did record several demos around 1980 to 1982 that were later put out on OPM Records. And that's what you see here. It was under a collection called Some Monsterism, which has kind of got a fun cover and a fun title to it. Dervish, as I said, never had any vinyl product of their own. They did make an appearance on a compilation album called Kent Rocks. This is a relatively obscure and pretty collectible compilation. They played a track called Cyclone on the compilation. It's one of the better tracks from this one. So before I carry on about Dervish and give them their 5 minutes of fame, let's begin by checking out a track of Cyclone. So actually, I tell you what, I'm going to start with one of the other tracks on here. We'll get to Cyclone, but let's start with a track called Hold On. That's from their 1982 demo, and see what that sounds like. We'll get to Cyclone in just a bit. As usual with these clips, I may jump ahead a little bit into the song to get past intros or, slower sections to give you a good idea of what it sounds like. So here from 1982 is Dervish with Hold On. All right, there's Dervish banging one out called Hold On from a 1982 demo, never released until OPM Records put it out on the Some Monsterism anthology in 2001. OPM Records is not around anymore, but this was kind of their forte back, in the late 90s and early 2000s. They'd find bands with unreleased material who had never really gotten the stuff put out, and they would do limited vinyl runs for it. The Dervish album, they printed 750 copies. 650 were on black vinyl. 100 Wrong green vinyl. As you saw when I held up my copy during the song clip, mine's on black vinyl. Came with 2 inserts. One of them is just kind of acknowledgments and thanks from the label. And the other has, kind of a short bio sketch from Derek Oliver about the band Dervish. So we get some band pictures on the back. One of these guys, Gavin Matthews, also played in local band Legend. This is the Legend that did the Hideaway single, the one that was from the Kent area. It was also on the Kent Rocks compilation. There was another band called Legend in the new wave of British heavy metal scene that did the Death in the Nursery LP and some other recordings, a Frontline EP. Different band. This particular version of Legend that's associated with Dervish, I'm not real nuts about that Hideaway single. Some people think it's a really good one. Just never really clicked with me. But anyway, we have a few fun band photos with guys here. This fellow's either got an inflatable rubber glove between his legs or something utterly horrible is happening. And it's not even the best band picture because this guy up here, for band picture day, he wore the same shirt that I wore on picture day in first grade when I was 6 years old. You hate to make fun of the way they look, but dude, when you're showing up for band photo day, that's not the shirt to wear. No, it's not. On the other hand, it's not like these photos were being taken to be put on an album because Dervish never got an album put out back in the day. So I guess we can't hold it against them too much. So yeah, they only appeared on the Kent Rocks compilation. I don't think this is one of the better compilations from back in the day. The White Witch label that it's on was a small and now a very collectible label. And several of the bands did get a single eventually, groups like Renegade. Dervish, though, I think is the real star on the compilation itself. This is just a bootleg CD pressing of the comp. It's also, as just a quick side note, it's also got the It's Unheard Of compilation spliced onto the disc, but there's not enough room for both of them, so a few tracks got left off. So if you do find or look for this particular pressing, be warned, you're not actually getting the full version of both albums. There wasn't enough room to cram them onto one disc, and so in kind of typical, unofficial release fashion, they just left some songs off. Okay. Anyway, back to Dervish. You can hear the band is really operating in a relatively heavy style. They've got a little bit more of a heavy chug to the music than is typical for a lot of new wave of British heavy metal acts. And the overall impression is you get kind of like maybe a second tier version of Diamond Head. Even the vocalist does kind of a strong Sean Harris impersonation at his best. Let's go ahead and check out another clip, and you can listen for it yourself. So this time we will hear a little bit of Cyclone, which is the track that was included on the Kent Rocks compilation. So here we go with Dervish's Cyclone. All right, so yeah, Dervish really nailing it on Cyclone there. It's got more of an up-a-tempo driving beat for a good part of the song, but that bridge, they really slow it down. It gets much heavier. Great vocals by Dave Montgomery, really kind of channeling his inner Diamond Head there quite a bit. So yeah, this was unfortunately it. There's no other Dervish recordings. OPM records typically didn't do CD pressings either. So if you want to check out the Dervish stuff, it's online, of course. But if you want a physical copy, you'll have to look for the OPM records compilation. Maybe the band will get a shot to release other material if they have additional stuff, or maybe this can get a repressing from another label at some point. All right, let's do one more band tonight. This one is a group that was even less successful than Dervish, which we're getting pretty low on the totem pole there, unfortunately to say. But this band never even made it onto a compilation back in the day. They only had some demo material recorded, and if memory serves me right, these demos first surfaced on the Colosseum website in the early 2000s. The Colosseum's a great collector website run by a really nice guy over in Sweden. It's got a wealth of information for folks that are very hardcore collectors into the obscure heavy metal stuff from the 1980s and 1990s. And at some point, somebody had posted a demo by this band. It got a lot of attention because folks weren't very familiar with it. And when you find something that these folks don't know, you found something pretty deeply buried. Interestingly, though, the band apparently was tracked down by a label, and an anthology collection with some of the tracks was quickly rolled out in 2011. The band in question is called Robespierre, named after the infamous figure from the French Revolutionary period. And the collection here is called Die, You Heathens, Die. Between the title and the giant red letters and the exclamation point, you get a sense right away that Robespierre may be doing something a little bit different than your average new wave of British heavy metal blokes. Reading some of the song titles will reinforce this for you. So let's check these out on the back of the reissue done in 2011 Buried by Time and Dust Records. We've got Backs to the Wall, Die, You Heathens, Die, I Am a Cannibal, Marching into Hell, also Decapitation. So these are not songs about wheels of steel or denim and leather. These sound promisingly heavy. What the heck does it sound like? Well, before I talk about Robespierre anymore, let's go find out what it sounds like. And let's begin with a little bit of that very first track, Backs to the Wall. So here's Robespierre.
All your empty visions, howling at the moon, praying for a new world and it may come too soon. Wait for Armageddon, chances at the gate, calling on the sinners who spend the world in hate. Back to the wall, Babylon will fall. Don't underestimate the power of the righteous. Back to the wall, Babylon will fall. Don't underestimate the power of the righteous.
Okay, Robespierre banging it out there, going very heavy by new wave of British heavy metal standards. These guys are venturing into sort of the Tank and Venom end of the pool. They're going to go play with the big kids here. You kind of get the same sense just from the quote on the back of the cover that they later included. Call me Satan, call me Lord, call my name in prayer, call me Master, call me Father, call me Robespierre. They found a rhyme for Robespierre. Good for them. You get not only a very heavy style there, it's got a very distinct punky influence to it. And that's not something you hear in a ton of new wave of British heavy metal. A lot of that generation of metal bands wanted very little to do with punk. They were kind of sick of punk. They were trying very intentionally to move away from punk. So it's not something you hear incorporated into a lot of new wave of British heavy metal, but these guys do it and it sounds really damn good. But is that just a one-track fluke? Well, let's check out some others here. Let's go for track number 2 here. A little bit of the Die, You Heathens, Die. So the title track to this anthology that was put out by Buried in Time and Dust Records in 2011. Here it is.
Now we rejoice to watch you burning in the heat. Die, you heathens, die. Your screams of pain
So, okay, much slower track that time, but yeah, very heavy, very doomy, still a bit over the top. This is not something you hear a lot of new wave of British heavy metal bands attempt to do. And some of the ones you hear attempt to do it, it either just isn't executed that well, or it kind of drifts into more like a biker rock kind of direction. Whereas, this is really sticking to that heavier template. Kronos and the guys might have been a little impressed by this. Let's do one more clip, because how often are you going to get to hear ROBESPIERRE? This is not exactly a household name among bands. Let's check out a bit of the track I Am a Cannibal. That song title just begs to be sampled. So let's see what we've got with that one. Here is I Am a Cannibal by ROBESPIERRE.
First of all, there was a scream and panic filled the air. Horror flame fell to the ground, the last sound that I heard. I was the lone survivor in this wilderness. I had no choice to save my life, and I have no regrets. I am a cannibal, I've tasted human flesh. I have the blood of friends smeared upon my face, I crave for more. And now I speak to you with knowledge of my crime.
Yeah, okay. ROBESPIERRE just keeps banging it out. Again, very heavy, punky vibe to it. That track's almost a little bit like old Misfits material. Very heavy, kind of, dark, weird humor going on, but very, very catchy at the same time. So I can definitely dig what was going on here. So ROBESPIERRE, not really a lot of seems to be known about the band necessarily. They're Buried by Time and Dust always does, nice vinyl releases. This one just kind of comes with a simple two-sided insert with lyrics and not a whole lot else to go along with it. The guys behind the band, though, did release a follow-up album. This came out on Shadow King Records in 2018, and it was called Garden of Hell. I have not heard it. I've only found a couple of reviews online, and they're not exactly glowing in their praise of the album, or lack thereof. Checking the personnel right now, it's the same couple of guys from the demo period represented on the Buried by Time and Dust anthology. So there wasn't really any new personnel brought in or left out of the recordings for Shadow Kingdom in 2018. So I'm not sure. We've seen a lot of these smaller bands get the anthology treatment, and sometimes it does lead to them kind of getting the band back together and taking another stab at things. A lot of times those attempts don't always work out. You're been out of the music business for decades at this point, didn't necessarily record a whole lot the first time around. So I feel like sometimes we're expecting a lot for these guys to, come back out of the woodwork and record something that sounds up to par with, demos they recorded when they were, 17 years old 4 decades ago. That's not an easy task to emulate after so much time goes by. But again, I have not heard the recording, so maybe the reviews online are a little bit too harsh and it's actually not that bad. I can say, though, I really do like the tracks on the Buried by Time and Dust anthology. It's a fun listen. It's a short listen. It has 9 tracks on it, but it only clocks in at about 29 minutes. So if you track down a copy, it's not going to take you very long to listen to it. It'll go by pretty fast. All right, that is going to do it for this edition of Let's Talk Metal. So now, let's talk metal in the comments down below. Lots of bands never made it to the vinyl stage, but did have recordings that have gotten out either through a compilation appearance or later anthology. What are some of your favorite bands that fell through the cracks and ended up in that category? We've seen, again, lots and lots of examples from the new wave of British heavy metal, but there's tons of examples from other music scenes as well. Also, which anthologies by these types of bands are worth checking out and which ones are not? Sometimes these bands' recordings never got released for a reason. The musical ideas just really weren't that solid, or the sound quality was really atrocious. We've all bought anthologies by some of these older bands and played them and thought, Wow, that just isn't particularly good. The ones I've featured here tonight, I think, are very good. Dervish had, a very high caliber of musical execution on a lot of their tracks, and Robespierre is just really, really damn fun. But not every anthology plays out that well. So, what are some that you would recommend to other viewers? Leave your comments down below to help kind of steer people towards the good anthology collections and also help steer them away from some that may not be worth their time or their hard-earned money. Nobody likes buying something and playing it once or twice only to realize that, yeah, this just wasn't worth the money I spent on it. Help folks out in the comments down below, and until next time, everybody take care, and as always, keep banging your head, just like a cannibal would.